The reason I supported Trump so strongly, to the point of going hardcore, is because I saw the political situation in the U.S. as a critical turning point. It wasn't just another election to me. It was a decisive fork in the road, with long-lasting consequences for the country. I believed that if the Democrats were given another 4 years in power, their policies would reshape the political landscape in a way that would essentially eliminate any future political balance. Specifically, I feared that the administration would push to legalize large numbers of undocumented immigrants in key swing states. These are the states that typically determine the outcome of presidential elections because they're not predictably Republican or Democrat. They can go either way. If millions of new voters who statistically tend to vote Democrat were legalized in those states, the argument goes, those states would no longer be competitive. They would become solidly blue Democratic strongholds. That would make it nearly impossible for Republicans to win national elections going forward. In other words, the country would effectively become a one-party system. Adding to the urgency of this concern was what I saw as a misuse of taxpayer dollars. Elon Musk highlighted an example. Federal emergency funds, meant to assist American citizens during natural disasters, were instead being used to house undocumented immigrants in luxury hotels in New York City. Meanwhile, actual Americans in crisis, like those in North Carolina or those affected by the fires in Maui, were reportedly not receiving comparable support. From this perspective, it looked like taxpayer money wasn't being used to help citizens, but rather to attract and support future Democratic voters. The deeper implication is that this isn't just about immigration policy. It's about fundamentally altering the electorate. It's what some would call importing voters, not through elections, but by changing the composition of the voting population. And if these new populations overwhelmingly vote Democrat, the swing states no longer swing. That would pave the way for Democrats to control the House, Senate, and White House indefinitely. From there, the fear is that they would consolidate power further. For example, by making Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states, which would add more reliably Democratic senators to Congress. Then they could expand the Supreme Court, pack the court, with liberal justices, tipping the judicial branch permanently in their favor. That would mean they'd have control over all three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial. Add to that the possibility of instituting centralized digital currencies, a social credit system, and tighter censorship of speech. It begins to look, to critics, like a soft authoritarian system masked as compassionate progressivism. This wasn't just a theoretical concern. Many who supported Trump did so because they felt that the Democratic Party's long-term plan was to entrench their power permanently under the appearance of helping people. But the end result, as they see it, would be the erosion of democracy, where elections no longer really matter because the outcome is predetermined by demographic and bureaucratic manipulation. Musk also reflected on what he viewed as two crucial moments that altered the trajectory of the country: Trump's loss in the 2020 election and Musk's own acquisition of Twitter, now X. He believed that if Trump hadn't been blocked from continuing in office, and if Twitter hadn't been taken out of what he perceived as the hands of censors, the world would look very different today. The ability to speak freely online and to resist the direction of a one-party system were, in his view, last-minute salvations from a deeper societal shift. Ultimately, this view holds that the push to legalize undocumented immigrants, censor speech, and consolidate institutional control isn't about compassion or progress. It's about securing long-term political dominance. That's what drove the deep, emotional investment in Trump. And that's also why some people feel they're being targeted or vilified, because they're standing in the way of what they see as a strategic, long-term power grab. At the core of the argument is the idea that censorship and control of information are central to this long-term plan. According to this view, mainstream media, big tech platforms, and even some government agencies have increasingly worked together to control narratives, silence dissenting voices, and shape public opinion in favor of progressive, globalist, or democratic ideals. Those who speak out, whether it's about immigration, COVID policies, election integrity, or gender issues, are often labeled as misinformation spreaders, conspiracy theorists, or extremists. This is why the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk is seen as another critical fork in the road. Prior to his acquisition, the platform was viewed by many on the right as a tool for censorship, a place where conservative viewpoints were routinely suppressed or banned under the guise of safety or policy violations. Musk framed his takeover as a reclaiming of free speech, aiming to restore open dialogue and transparency. To him and many of his supporters, that move helped rebalance the flow of information just in time to prevent what they perceived as a total ideological takeover. What Musk warns about next is even more dystopian: the potential introduction of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and social credit scoring systems, similar to what exists in China. These tools could, in theory, be used by a powerful government to monitor and control behavior. Imagine if your ability to access your bank account, travel, or even post online could be restricted based on your political beliefs or online activity. This is the kind of system Musk and others fear, where dissent isn't just discouraged, it's punished materially. This control, they argue, wouldn't be as obvious as outright dictatorship. It would be wrapped in the language of compassion, progress, and justice. Leaders wouldn't call themselves tyrants. They would say they're protecting people from hate speech, from economic instability, from inequality. But the outcome, they believe, would be the same: centralization of power and the erosion of individual rights. Musk argues that the democratic political machine, by controlling media, academia, Hollywood, large corporations, and federal agencies, has the ability to push this agenda while presenting it as popular will. Anyone who pushes back, whether it's Trump, independent journalists, or everyday citizens, is immediately labeled as a threat to democracy, even though, from Musk's view, they're the ones actually trying to preserve democracy. One of the key arguments made is that most Americans aren't even aware this is happening. They're not being told the full story. They might see increasing homelessness, rising prices, and overwhelming immigration, but they don't connect these issues to a broader political strategy. Musk's invitation to do your own research is a challenge to people to look beyond the headlines and ask who benefits from these trends, who funds them, and what the end goal really is. From this perspective, what happened, or almost happened to California, serves as the ultimate cautionary tale. Once a conservative or competitive state, California is now a Democratic stronghold. Those who hold this view argue that this shift wasn't entirely organic. It was helped along by mass immigration, favorable media coverage, public spending programs, and changes to the voter base. Musk and others fear that the same formula is being applied now to swing states like Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. States that, once flipped, could create a permanent electoral majority for one party. And once that majority is secured, the final moves can be made, adding new states, expanding the Supreme Court, and ensuring that dissenting voices are marginalized or excluded entirely. At that point, elections would still happen, but they would be formalities, predictable outcomes with no real competition. That, Musk says, would be the end of the America that many people grew up in. A place where power changes hands, where voices from all sides are heard, and where the government works for the people, not the other way around. That's why, in his view, supporting Trump wasn't about liking every aspect of him. It was about stopping what he saw as a quiet, strategic takeover of the system itself. In the end, this perspective isn't just about immigration, Trump, or Twitter. It's about a vision of the future, and whether that future is decided by the free will of the people or engineered by a class of elites behind closed doors. In the final part of this story, the stakes become even clearer. This is no longer just about Trump immigration or social media. It's about the survival of a system, the American democratic experiment as it has existed for over 2 centuries. Musk and others who share his view believe we're at a critical point in history where apathy, distraction, and trust in centralized institutions are being weaponized against the public. They argue that if people don't wake up, if they keep trusting that the system is still neutral and fair, they'll lose their country without even realizing it. The changes won't come as dramatic overnight revolutions. They'll come gradually, through policies passed quietly, through new norms introduced in schools, through the normalization of censorship, and through subtle but irreversible demographic shifts that change how elections work. A tipping point will be reached, and by the time it's clear, it will be too late to reverse. That's why Musk describes the 2020 election and his acquisition of Twitter as dual turning points. If Trump had won, they believe it would have been a break in the machine's momentum, a way to push back on what they saw as a long-term strategy to seize cultural and political control. And if Musk hadn't bought Twitter, a major platform would have remained a gatekeeper for what people are allowed to say and see. Without those breaks in the system, he says, we'd be living in a different world right now. One where all major institutions are aligned in enforcing a single worldview while punishing those who question it. Musk sees the fight not just in terms of politics, but as a civilizational clash between freedom and control, between open dialogue and propaganda, between individual autonomy and engineered consent. But with this warning comes a message of urgency and resolve. He knows that speaking out puts a target on his back. Musk references how the Democrat machine wants to destroy him, not necessarily because of who he is personally, but because of what he represents. A disruption to their control, a break in their narrative dominance, a figure who can't be easily silenced or bought. He expresses frustration that so many people still can't see it. The media spins his statements, politicians dismiss his concerns, and everyday citizens continue to vote for the very policies that, in his view, are harming them. He compares the progressive agenda to a Trojan horse. It arrives dressed in compassion, justice, and equity, but inside is the machinery of power consolidation and social manipulation. And even beyond political concerns, Musk warns that even Democrats will eventually suffer under the system they are helping to build. A society built on censorship, surveillance, and centralized economic control won't stop with conservatives. It will eventually turn on anyone who steps out of line, left or right. That's the lesson of history, and it's the part he believes people are ignoring. In the end, the reason he went so hardcore for Trump was not because of party loyalty, not because of ideology, and certainly not because of personal gain. It was because he believed Trump was the only major figure in position to stand in the way of a system that is trying to engineer permanent dominance. It was, to Musk, an existential decision, a final stand at the last fork in the road before the country takes a path that leads to soft tyranny cloaked in kindness. He finishes the story with a kind of open challenge. Do your own research. Look past the headlines, follow the money, question narratives. Because once you really start looking, he says, you'll see what he sees. That this isn't a conspiracy theory, but a strategic campaign with real goals, real consequences, and real momentum. And if enough people realize that, if they step out of fear, apathy, or convenience, there might still be time to pull back from the edge, not to save one man, one party, or one election, but to save a country from slowly ceasing to be what it once was, a place where freedom, not control, is the foundation of everything.